Hey there, and welcome to Open class number 56. Hope you're doing really well. I'm excited to have 4 messages to go over. 2 of them are pretty short. One is quite long, but I think, regardless, we are going to have several natto concepts, models, ways that I think will be really helpful for hopefully the person who wrote the message and anyone else that tunes in as well. If you're new to the channel, you may not have seen kind of the transition from the beginning, when this was basically a channel where I taught like traditional cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia. Over the years, realized there were some problems with it, and that a different way was more helpful, which really led to kind of organically led to natto, non-attachment to the outcome, which is what we call our philosophy, our school of thinking. And so I'm going to try to really present that nicely today. And I'm writing a book that's called This is Natto. It's almost done as well. So anyway, let's get going here. As usual, nothing here is medical advice, just general thoughts and comments that I hope will help anyone that is tuning in. So with that said, let's jump right in here and check out a question from Tamsin. I'm sorry if I say your name incorrectly, but I'll say Tamsin. Okay, hi Daniel. I've just read your book. I bet that's Set It and Forget It. And I've been watching some of your YouTube videos. I wonder if you would be able to give me some reassurance. Everything in your book made so much sense, and the gas and brake idea puts it all so simply. Gas and brake model, very important one for anyone out there. And I talk about it a lot in the playlist. If you check the description of any new video, there's a playlist called This is Natto. In there you will find an episode on the gas and brake model, very important one. All right. I was taking zolpidem every night for 4 years until 3 months ago when I went to a detox rehab center to come off it. I was starting to need higher doses to keep me asleep. Since then, my sleep has been erratic. Occasionally, I get 7 hours, but it's mostly 4, 5, sometimes only 2. I'm getting desperately frustrated as my life is basically on hold. I'm so exhausted. A lot of the time, I believe CBT is the way through this, and I went to bed last night thinking I understood what has been happening with me and how my faulty beliefs hamper my sleep. But I was awake until 5 a.m. because it felt like I was giving myself a running commentary on every little sign that I was either about to fall asleep or not all night. It's like it's giving me an extra set of thoughts rather than taking the worry away. Then I started to think, is CBT going to work, or is there something actually wrong with my sleep mechanism? I know you say that our bodies know how to sleep and we can't damage that, but I have been following a Facebook thread on mirtazapine usage, as this was the drug my doctor suggested. I took one, but binned them. It was so awful. I noticed lots of people saying their insomnia is awful, then they withdraw from this drug, and this doesn't sound like sleep anxiety, although it could be. Would you think that my insomnia 3 months after zolpidem could in any way be a physical thing in my brain, or am I just overthinking everything? Any little insight would be so welcome, because I'm feeling desperate and have 2 beautiful children to take care of. Thank you so much, Tamsin. Absolutely. Let's go over this in detail here. I hope it'll be really helpful to you. We definitely have to talk here about, I'm going to create some banners here. We definitely have to talk about the type 2 concern. Okay, very important. And then we're going to talk about upping the stakes. And then should we talk? What else should we talk about? I think that the timeless way, maybe timeless way that also applies. But I think those are the important things that I came across immediately here. Zolpidem, detox, pegging. I mean, we also have to talk about pegging, of course. All right, so I think we have 4 important things to talk about. These are actually 2, 1, 2, 3 are natto concepts, and 1 is a model. So let's go over this. So firstly, I want to thank you, Tamsin, for sending this message. And I want to say, like, reading this, there's nothing here that's unusual in any way. And I just realized the other thing that I want to talk about here, which is the extinction burst. So we have actually 5 things we want to talk about here. All right. So I hope, Tamsin, this will make a lot of sense to you. So first of all, I want to talk about the extinction burst. So here's the thing. When you start a program, whether it is a CBT program or whether you do a natto-based program like ours are, you often actually see that things kind of get, you sleep less before you start sleeping better. You sort of take a little nosedive, if you will. Now, this can often seem like, this can of course be very like disheartening. It's like, hey, I started this because I wanted to sleep better, but now things are going in the opposite direction. Is something wrong with me? Am I doing this wrong? What's going on? Nothing of that sort at all. It is actually completely expected. And this is what we call an extinction burst. So let's go over this. So imagine that you have a little toddler who, and maybe you have a toddler actually, Tamsin, so maybe this will really resonate with you. Let's say you have a toddler who's always trying to, the toddler wants your attention, right? Because they want to feel safe, they want to feel cared for, so they want your attention. Sometimes they get your attention by doing things like acting out, like screaming and shouting and doing things like that, that's not enjoyable at all for you as a parent. Now, you may realize at some point that by giving them attention, by saying, hey, either way, getting mad at them or playing with them, whatever they want, you reinforce that behavior that is that's not very pleasant, that the unwanted behavior, if you will. And then you may realize, hey, okay, I get it. I got to stop giving my kid attention when they're acting up, and therefore they won't get anything from it and they will stop. And check this out. So when you start doing that, which is the right thing to do, you don't give them attention when they act up. They're going to act up even more because they've gotten used to getting attention. So they're like, oh, this isn't working anymore. I really got to they act up even more. They really start kicking and screaming and really desperately trying to get your attention. But eventually, if you just stick to your plan, you're like, no, I'm not going to give them any attention. They eventually get bored and they're like, okay, I'm going to go play with my toy instead. But that initial, when they act up more before that behavior starts going away, is called an extinction burst or a pre-extinction burst. Completely normal. Exact same thing happens with insomnia too. Your brain has had this idea that something is really wrong. There's a threat out there. There's a problem, and it from a safety perspective, it wants you to like really focus on this problem, to solve this problem, right? And when you go in the direction of like, no, I don't think there's a problem, actually. I'm going to maybe spend some less time in bed. I'm going to pay less attention. Then the brain goes ballistic. And it goes like, what's wrong with you? There's a real problem. You got to think about this. What if this happens? What are you doing wrong? Blah, 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 blah. So often you have this extinction burst when it comes to sleep too. When you start a program, things often get, you sleep less. You actually have more anxiety before things get better. So it's nothing wrong. It's actually very reassuring, if anything, that you have that reaction. It's a typical reaction. So extinction burst, that is number one. Okay, now I think next here are going to talk about what I call the type 2 concern. It's a very, 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 very important concept because it explains why you so often think there probably is something wrong with me. The brain is like this expert at finding reasons why your insomnia is a little bit different. You can find like 92% is like, yeah, it's exactly like everyone else's, but guess what? These 8% are different. So why is it that you so often feel I'm different, or like my insomnia has changed, or something may be really wrong with it? This is called a type 2 concern. So I find the best way of explaining this is to use the analogy, or use that story of the boy who cried wolf. Okay. So for those of you who are not familiar, there's a boy who's tasked with guarding the village's sheep, and he gets bored and he shouts, "There's a wolf!" And then, villagers come to rescue him, but there is no wolf. They go back. He does the same thing again. They try to rescue him again. He goes back. Third time, there actually is a wolf. And now he goes, "Wolf!" Nobody believes him, So they're like, "No, there's no wolf." And then he gets eaten by the wolf, right? And so here in this story, we have example of a type 2 error, which is, if anybody familiar with statistics, you'll know about the type 2 error. That's basically when you, in context of this, is where it's a false alarm. The boy cries wolf, but there isn't any. It's a false alarm. Insomnia is a type 1 error. It is a false alarm. But now we're going to talk about the type 2 error, which is when you hear the alarm go off, but you think there's no problem. Like the villagers, they heard the boy cry wolf, but they didn't do anything. and then there was a real problem there for the boy, and they probably felt terrible afterwards, right? So here's the thing. The brain is a survival machine. It always wants to keep you safe. The brain does not want to commit a type 2 error. It does not want to miss anything that potentially could put you in harm's way. So it is very, very afraid of a type 2 error, and that's what we call a type 2 concern. So whenever you get these thoughts that, hey, I have sleep maintenance insomnia. I have no problem falling asleep, but I can't stay asleep. I have no problem staying asleep, but I can't fall asleep. I don't even feel sleepy during the day. I, have these jerks and twitches. I have palpitations. I have this. My insomnia started after childbirth. My insomnia started after pregnancy. My insomnia is hormonal. Mine's because I stopped taking medication. Mine's because of this. That is your brain being concerned about missing something. That is a type 2 concern. And when you understand this, when you understand the type 2 concern, you can easily and in a gentle and kind way say to the brain, aha, I understand why you're always trying to make me think there's something wrong with me. I get it. You're trying to keep me safe, but there is actually nothing. There's nothing going on. Insomnia is from a perceived threat. So when you understand the type 2 concern, you can move forward in a very nice fashion there. Okay. Now I want to move over to another concept, which is upping the stakes, which is, we heard Tamsin say, I basically put my life on hold, and also like I have 2 children to care for. And upping the stakes is basically like something I borrowed from poker, where you're like, you kind of like putting more tokens in so that there's kind of more excitement. There's more at stake here, right? Which you can easily tell that's fun if you're playing poker, right? But upping the stakes, having more at risk, probably not good when we're talking about sleep. It doesn't lend itself to sleeping well. Yet, when you have trouble sleeping, you often up the stakes, unintentionally, of course. But this is when you're like, oh man, I just have to start sleeping better so I can get a new job, or I have to sleep better so I can take better care of my kids. You're actually pressurizing yourself more to sleep. The stakes are higher. It's even more important, that you sleep well, not just because you want to sleep well like everyone else. It's actually something that your job depends on it. Your parenting depends on it. You're upping the stakes. And so what should you do when you realize that, I'm upping the stakes, it's probably not good for me? Just be aware of it, be aware that, this thinking is probably not helpful for me. And try to find reasons to see that, like try to find evidence that you can actually function well, even when you slept a little, like not everything depends on it. That's the way to like reduce the stakes again. But just being aware of it is the most important, because then you automatically kind of like move away from upping the stakes. We have seen that, the timeless way, I'm just going to very, very briefly talk about it, is I think super important. It is basically like in Tamsin's message, we see many notations of time, like it took me this long to fall asleep. I think I was up until 5 a.m. and these type of things. Knowing what time it is and keeping kind of track of how much you slept is a way to have some sort of control, but you cannot control sleep. So it's very important to let go of any efforts of controlling sleep. And so the timeless way is very good, that not knowing what time it is, not monitoring, not checking how much you slept, it is a very powerful way of letting go of control. So I want to mention that. And finally, I want to talk about pegging, which is another important natto concept. And this is when you attribute your insomnia to something that you cannot control, or you don't have any, at least any immediate control over it. This could be something that happened in the past. Like my insomnia started because I had a car accident, 22 years ago. That's what or the classic one in Tamsin's case here. Could my insomnia be because I came off a medication 3 months ago? If you attribute it to something like that happened in the past that you have no control over, it is very disempowering. And we know that insomnia, sleep disruption, poor sleep can happen for a million reasons, but ongoing struggle with sleep, that's only our thoughts. Our thought habits are producing that. So it's not something that happened in the past. And when you think it is that something that happened in the past that is still to this day causing you to have trouble sleeping, you're pegging, you're attaching your insomnia to something that you have no control over. and that doesn't lend itself to good sleep. So I hope, Tamsin, that this made sense to you. Yeah, if you have any follow-up questions, please submit them. Thanks for purchasing my book. If you like it, don't consider leaving a review. That helps a lot. But okay, very good, Tamsin. We will move along here and talk about a question from Jeff. Let me share this with you. Jeff has actually been a guest on the show. He used an app called Sleep Eddy, and I think he was actually also a BedTyme client for a little bit. Now has a follow-up question. Hi, Daniel. Now that the holiday season is over and we're returning to the normal schedule, I have found my insomnia has returned too. I'm confused as to why this might be happening. I'm a bit anxious about the change in my schedule, but it's really just returning to what it was before the holidays. Can this anxiety cause insomnia to temporarily return too? Oh, the anxiety about the change in schedule. Yes, right. And yeah, Jeff, yeah, absolutely. There's no mystery whatsoever when it comes to insomnia. Anything that makes you anxious can make you have more trouble sleeping. If somebody has never ever had trouble sleeping and they're anxious, it probably won't affect their sleep too much. But if you've had trouble sleeping at any point and you're anxious again, that can easily trigger the same thought patterns. But I think the two things I want to bring up here is the most important one is probably this one, that when you've used an app like Sleep Eddy or BedTyme, or you've gone through CBTI or whatever it is, and you slept better, it is so important to me to see that it wasn't because you did anything. It was not because you didn't do anything that made you sleep better. It was, in fact, that the education, the teaching, the support that you got led you to a place where you tried less, where you actually were more okay with being awake at night. You were less resistant to having some trouble sleeping. And when you tried less, you slept more. And when you see that, then you realize, I've actually already experienced the benefits of letting go. And when you completely see that, you can easily again go to a place where, like, okay, if I don't sleep much tonight, that's all right. That's okay. I'm going to be fine. And when you go down that path, you start sleeping very well again. And what was the other thing? The other one was more, this one where, when you had trouble sleeping in the past and you start becoming like anxious for any reason and it spills over into sleep and you sleep a little, then your mind easily goes into, what if I go back? What if I have trouble sleeping again? And then here's the tricky thing. Then you often, like, your kind of answer to that often becomes to convince yourself that that's not going to happen. You go, no, I know so much more now. No, I can do this. I know these techniques. I can keep myself, I can control this, basically, is what you're saying, which is tricky, because the more you kind of try to resist, the more it persists. So actually, when there's something we are fearful of and we try to like hide from it and say like, that's not going to happen, it often has more power over us. So scary as it sounds, the best is really to go in the direction of like, yeah, I had trouble sleeping in the past, and that can happen again. And if that happens again, I'll be okay. And then when you're willing to experience X has no power over you. It's not scary to you. The fear of X dissolves. So I think those are the common the things I just want to share here. But the short answer to your question, Jeff, is like, yes, it could be anxiety. And then, but if you just like apply everything we talked about, you'll do great again. Lois is here. Hi, Coach. I wrote to you in BedTyme, but can send over a quick summary here. I had two. Okay. I haven't gotten to that yet, but I had two very scary dreams last night. Kind of scared to sleep tonight, thinking more will come. What should I do? Actually, it's very timely you asked this. So what we just talked about with Jeff, I think applies very, very well here. Scary dreams, typically just mean that, the content of dreams typically is, mirrors how we feel. So if we are sort of anxious or thinking about something that's not too pleasant, we can easily have, scary dreams. Now, here's the thing. If you go in the direction of, I don't want to have scary dreams again, I got to do something so I don't have them. How can I not have these scary dreams again? You're trying to control something you cannot control. And that leads to this frustration, this fear, this anxiety. What if it happens again? What if I can't control it? Then you're more likely to have those scary dreams again. When you go in the opposite direction, just like we talked with Jeff, and you say, yes, I might have those scary dreams again. And that's going to be unpleasant. It might happen again. But if it happens, that's okay. I'm going to be okay with that happens. And I know eventually, I'll be doing really well. So kind of being willing to experience something, being willing to experience these scary dreams again, that neutralizes the fear of them. And basically, it's kind of like fear is kind of like the brain warning us about something. Like, think about this. What if this happens? Like, be alert, presenting problems for us because it wants us to problem solve. So when we show the brain that, no, there's nothing to be afraid of, and I'm willing to listen to you, brain, then again, then it sees like, I don't need to warn this person all the time. I don't need to bombard them with these kind of scary thoughts. And then the brain backs off and, good things happen to you. Lovely C, I hope that made sense to you. If not, let me know and I'll reply in the app tomorrow, of course. Very cool. So let us move along here and talk about a question from Simeon. Hi, I appreciate you responding to my question, but you didn't offer much helpful advice. I'm sorry about that. My sleep disability stems from chronic pain that I've suffered from for 5 years since turning 20 in October 19 of 2015, January 1st, 16, sometime around there. When my accident happened, I'm now 25 and I practically haven't slept since 2018 when I was 23. In short, tips on what I could do to fall asleep with chronic pain apart from painkillers. They don't help much. Thank you in advance. Yes, Simeon, absolutely. So, not uncommon, this scenario. And I think, I would really, really recommend reading up on something called like mind-body syndrome, they call it. I forget who this the name of who talks a lot about it, but it's somebody in, I think, Harvard or one of those big university systems talks a lot about mind-body syndrome, and it's very similar to insomnia. What he says is that chronic pain typically happens, when you're in, for example, an accident. And around the time of the accident, there may have already been some stress or anxiety in your life, or maybe it just started happening around the time where you had the accident. It was a stressful event. And then, in that time of like heightened stress and your kind of stress hormones are high, then, you can easily get to a point where, you kind of identify pain as a problem beyond kind of like the mere physical pain, if you will. And then it becomes just like insomnia, that the pain becomes almost like an emotion. It becomes this like, it's not that the pain is not real. It's very, very real, but it's not driven by like a physical thing. It's driven by like your relationship with the pain. And then the more, just like insomnia, the more you want to be, the more you want to get away from being awake, the more you want to sleep, the more you struggle. And the same thing with the pain there, that the more you like, I want this to go away, and you try the medications, no, they don't help, because again, it's not physical pain. That the pain comes from your relationship with the pain, and how you think about how you react to it. And so the more you kind of want to get away from it, the stronger it becomes, the more testing, the more procedures, the more medications, the more ingrained it becomes. And so the key to chronic pain, I believe, is the same as the key to like insomnia. It's like kind of going in the opposite direction, like sort of like befriending the pain, if you will, like being like, okay, I have this pain, it's real, it's there, but I'm going to go in a direction of showing myself that I can do things even if I have pain. I can live my life even if I have pain, and just like taking baby steps, and and then basically teaching the brain that pain is not a threat. And the threat picture is very important, just like with insomnia, because when the brain identifies like pain is a threat, it's a problem, it's something that shouldn't be there, and and the brain basically deploys a fight or flight response that it tries to make you figure out the pain and move away from it, like get away from it. Then those are techniques that work great when you're facing like a grizzly bear or something physical. But with pain, or like that emotional pain, or like insomnia, like wakefulness, you can't escape from it. You can't outrun it. You can't crush it. You can't defeat it. So when you try and it doesn't work, then the brain says, oh, this is a real big problem. and it kind of intensifies the struggle you have and your attempts at getting away from it. And then you're in this cycle of like, the more you try to get away from it, the stronger it becomes, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So, I think understanding pain, super important. Changing your relationship with pain, super important. And I think really that's my best answer, is that insomnia and pain, chronic pain, come from the same place. They come from a place where the more you try to avoid discomfort, the more problem you have. So changing your relationship with wakefulness, doing things that you like to do when you're awake at night, and not trying to force yourself to sleep, going the timeless way, not knowing what time it is overnight, and just listening more to this channel and learning more. I think that's the key to insomnia and pain. We already talked about that. So, Simeon, I hope that was more helpful than my previous answer. And if not, then just please submit another question. All right. So we have one more question from Susan. So let's go over this one. Dear Coach Daniel, I've always thought I was a chronic insomniac. Even as a baby, I couldn't sleep. I was an orphan who lived in an orphanage until I was 1.5. My adopted mom said when she brought me home, I was terrified to sleep. Next became a problem because of being made to sleep for a certain time for school. I basically went to school exhausted every day. Then I had periods of okay sleep and just took off-the-counter sleep aids. I've gone to all types of therapy, and I use something that the UK NHS providers provide for free called Sleep Station with psychologists. I'm still in their program. I can tell now, looking at the work they do, they're carefully, that it's CBTI, but they didn't explain to me why we were restricting my sleep. So I just ignored them for months, thinking their idea was silly, until I came to your channel. Even though I think they are doing regular CBTI, I think they aren't as forward thinking as you are. With my insomnia, I had actually created the thought that my brain was locked in a big black box and I couldn't get it to make me sleep. I honestly thought I was the worst person in the world for sleeping. From reading your YouTube comments, I know I'm not alone in that delusion. That's so important to see that you're not alone. I'm so happy you came across those comments. I tried everything. If a new counselor or dietitian or helper or whoever asked if I knew about sleep hygiene, I would dutifully list out all the stuff I learned from spending most of my adult life researching insomnia. I have had zopiclone, zolpidem, diazepam, and Mogadishu, and everything in between. Everything worked and then didn't work. I blame myself. I was constantly tired, horrible to my family, friends. I used to hit my head trying to dislodge the box I created in my brain. I lost most of my friends because I was so tired I stopped meeting up with them. So one night just before Christmas, I had one of my worst 3 nights, no sleep I ever had. I was scourging the internet for advice, came across your videos. And I was at first, they're going to mention lavender and no lines to make you sure to sleep 8 hours or you'll go mad. Let's see. My friend said after 3 nights of sleep, you go mad. He went on to say some countries use it as torture for prisoners of war. So I was truly deeply scared that I was going to mentally affected. I was sitting on my floor, rocking back and forth, dying quietly to myself. I will never sleep again. Anyway, back to your videos. I have said it to you on YouTube and truly mean it. You already have changed my life. Why? Because they might. I listened to your interview with Sasha and I understood a lot and I took to heart to be kind to yourself. Since then, I haven't actually stopped having insomnia effects. I know it isn't real, but I don't know how to get myself to really believe that. Also, I'm unemployed. Can't do your app, but I was going to buy your book. But as you said, it's not an Audible yet. Oh yeah, and I'm partially sighted. So to be clear for my waffle, my question is, what actual things or non-thoughts can I do to stop thinking about sleep if it works that way? Thank you so much. All right. Well, Susan, I think, this was, one of those messages where you really, really get a sense for like, wow, insomnia has really, really impacted your life. And I just want to briefly talk about like how I think it's so unfortunate when, and by the way, I think this happens all the time. No judgment to anyone out there on the planet, but oftentimes I hear parents that have brought their kids to me in clinic and they say like, oh, she's a terrible sleeper. She never sleeps and, she can't sleep and things like that. And they're like 2 or 3 years old, these kids. And of course, if they hear that all the time, they're going to believe it, and they're going to form this kind of identity that I am an insomniac. I've been since childhood, and that's going to make them feel like there's kind of like that's just who they are, etc. So I think sounds like that happened to you, Susan. Again, no judgment to anyone, but I just want to anyone that's a parent out there, maybe just like, be careful, because identity can easily form very, very early on. Now, I think actually I thought this was going to be kind of a long answer to this one, but it kind of boiled down to this specific question, which is, how can I keep myself? What actual things or non-thoughts can I do to stop thinking about sleep? And this is a very important question. It comes up all the time, and it's basically like, how do I stop obsessing? And the problem with that, of course, is the pink elephant problem, which is like, if I say, don't think about a pink elephant, you think about a pink elephant. Like if you try not to think of something, you kind of automatically think about that. So when you're like, I think all the time about sleep, I think about sleep all the time, and I don't want to do that. What should I do? Well, I think the first one is education, which I think, Susan, you've already done. Like you listened, you learned a lot. So because when you understand something, letting go becomes a little bit easier. Sometimes when you completely understand that, there is no problem really, then you kind of automatically think less about sleep. But sometimes that doesn't happen, at least not kind of early on. So the question here becomes, how do you not think about something? And this is where I default to this analogy, like which I call like brain train, the brain train analogy, which is, I think I call that the part of the tangible way in my book. But anyway, so here's the thing. Imagine that you are on a walk wherever you live, right? And you see your friend is about to cross the railroad tracks, and there's a train coming, and she apparently doesn't see it. What do? Of course, you want to warn her. So you go, hey, Susan, watch out. And then, your friend just keeps walking. And then you get really, really upset. You're like, hey, Susan, watch out. This time, she actually covers her ears and she keeps walking. Right? Okay. Now you get super, super upset, and you're like, you really want to help her, right? So you throw some rocks, you shout, you scream, and then finally she turns around and says, hey, there's nothing going on. Look, we're shooting a movie here. And then you look around, it's like, oh, there's all these props. There's not a real train. And you're like, oh, I see. And then of course you see no need to warn her at all right now. There's no need to warn her. The only thing is, like, you kind of wish that she would have she could have told you before, and you showed you that she was listening before, so you didn't have to get all worked up. Okay. So what does this have to do with sleep or thoughts in general? Well, here's the thing. Insomnia comes from a place of fear and anxiety, and the brain has gotten to thinking that it needs to keep you safe from this threat, which is being awake at night, which is not a real threat, but it thinks it is. And so it's kind of serving you all these thoughts about sleep. Like, what if you can sleep? Maybe you should this, maybe there's something there's something wrong with you, blah, 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 right? And then when you go, I don't want to listen to this, I don't want to have all these thoughts, then you're kind of like Susan in this example, who like didn't want to listen to the warnings. And then the person warning her felt the stronger need to warn her, gotta get her to listen. That's how the brain works. So the more you don't want to think about sleep, the more the brain is going to feel like it needs to like really make you listen. Okay. So you kind of have to go in the opposite direction. And just understanding this in itself, I think, is very helpful. But to give you something more concrete, I think thoughts download. I think this is a very practical, good one, which is basically you just set up some time during the day, a few minutes, 5-10 minutes, and you just write down all the thoughts that pop up, during the day. Without the only intent with that is to show the brain that you're listening. Yep, I'm listening. I heard that thought. I heard that thought. I heard that thought. I heard that thought. And you do that once a day. Download. Give the brain an outlet. Very good one. The other one that I think can be maybe even more effective, but it's kind of scary, is like I call it being willing to go there. Being willing to go there. Okay. And what does this mean? That means that when the brain warns you about something, you actually imagine that thing in your mind. So the brain says, what if you don't sleep for 4 days? And that's super scary. Then you're like, okay, I'm going to imagine that. And you literally imagine 1, 2, 3, 4 nights of no sleep at all. You imagine how you're going to feel. You imagine how anxious you're going to be. You imagine that. And guess what? When you are willing to imagine that thing the brain is trying to warn you about all the time, you're truly showing the brain that you're listening. You're like really saying, yeah, I'm listening, I'm willing to go there. And then the brain is like, oh, she's really listening here. I don't need to warn her all the time. So those are like two ways I think are really helpful. Cool. So and I don't have no announcements really. I want to say that for anyone that likes natto teaching, you like what we teach here, then and you know you would like to get some more support than we offer here, just in our free videos and open classes, etc. If you'd like to join a group of students, then consider our self-coaching program. You can actually sign up for a free class on the sleepcoachschool.com. And this is great if you like video, because the curriculum is video-based, and we do live classes every Friday where we talk to our students, with our students, guide our students, etc. And BedTyme also, the app where I coach, and that's very convenient. And there's also natto teaching there, of course. All right. Juan says, hi, Daniel. Would CBTI be helpful even if I'm taking sleeping pills? Yeah, it's a very good question. This comes up all the time. And where should we start this one? I want to say that there's absolutely no problem in my mind if you do one of two things. Either you take a medication every night, same dose, same time, like you would take a vitamin pill, without thinking more about it. You just take it. Or you don't take it at all. In both those scenarios, there's no problem, because the medication has become a non-factor. If you take it the same dose, same time every night, or you don't take it at all, either way, you will see that the variation you have in your sleep has nothing to do with the medication. Super, super helpful. The problem is when someone is like kind of experimenting and say like, oh, tonight I don't think I need it, but tonight I really need it. I'm going to see if I need it. Maybe I should take half of it. Tomorrow I'm going to take double. That becomes very confusing, because you never get to see that it's not the medication. The medication has really very little impact on your sleep. And if you kind of experiment, then you never get to see that. So yeah, I think CBT does this great, even if you're on medication, as long as you make it a non-factor. Absolutely. All right. So with that said, I want to say thanks everyone for tuning in, and I will be back very shortly tomorrow. In fact, I intend to talk about a new natto concept, which is the counter effort. The counter effort, when avoiding a sleep effort becomes an effort. Actually, very common. So we're going to talk about it tomorrow. Until then, all right.